All right, we are now to the last group of plants that we're going to be discussing in this module. Again, big picture, we've talked about both non-vascular and vascular plants. The mosses were your non-vascular plants, very low and short to the ground. They have to be because they don't have any tubes so that they can carry water and dissolved minerals a long way. So they have to stay right close to the ground where they're going to be able to absorb everything. Your tracheophytes do have that network of tubes within them, but they are then further subdivided into seedless plants, which are your ferns, and your seed makers. We talked about the conifers already, which have a naked seed. Now we're going to be discussing the angiosperms, which have an enclosed seed. Angiosperms are any type of plant that makes a flower, although a flower may not necessarily be something bright and colorful and pretty. Some flowers, you might even recognize them as flowers. The author specifically mentions the tassel on a corn plant is actually a flower. That doesn't match the description we normally think of as a flower, but it does function that way. All right, so once again, just as with the gymnosperms, with our angiosperms, the gametophyte generation is not going to be a separate plant. It is protected within the sporophyte. So I've got my big sporophyte plant that is going to produce a flower. Now you've already done a whole lot of work with the structure of a flower, all the different parts of the flower. You know that the ovary is contained in the female part of the flower as part of the carpel. The anther is a part of the stamen, which is the male part of the flower. You've already read about complete flowers and incomplete flowers and simple and compound flowers. So you've done all that already. So you've got a good background on flowers already. So within your ovary, within your anther, they're going to undergo meiosis. Now let's talk about the female first. So your female cell is going to undergo meiosis. And this should look familiar here because we talked about this when we talked about reproduction back in the chapter on mitosis and meiosis. Once you have your one diploid cell that undergoes meiosis, you end up with one megaspore and three polar bodies. This megaspore is what's going to become your egg, if you recall. And then you've got three polar bodies that didn't get quite as much cytoplasm and quite as much other stuff, and so they end up disintegrating and not being used for anything. Okay, so this megaspore ends up undergoing mitosis. It actually undergoes mitosis 3 times. So if you have a cell, it undergoes mitosis once. You're going to have 2 cells. Those 2 cells undergo mitosis again, and there's going to be 4 cells. It undergoes mitosis again, and you would have 8 cells. However, when this megaspore undergoes division, the cells don't completely divide. It goes ahead and makes all the separate nuclei that it's going to take, but then it doesn't divide the way we would normally assume that it's going to divide. What it ends up happening is once it gets all those 8 nuclei made, it then divides, and I've got 6 small cells, but 2 of the nuclei go together and stay together in one cell. And that is all enclosed inside of an embryo sac. Okay, so I've started out with 1 cell that's gone through meiosis, and then this megaspore, then we'll go through mitosis 3 times, and this is the end result. So inside the embryo sac, which is going to be inside the ovule, down in the flower, you've got 6 small cells and 1 big cell with 2 nuclei. Okay, so kind of put a marker in your book there, so to speak. We're going to come back to that later, but that's where that has ended up for the moment. Now let's go back over here to the anther, which is the male part of the flower. You're going to have a cell here that goes through meiosis and again produces 4 microspores, just like you learned when we were in the mitosis and meiosis chapter, produces 4. And so then what happens here is that each one of those microspores becomes a pollen grain, but the pollen grain actually has more cells within it than just the one, because the microspores continue to undergo mitosis. So within each pollen grain, and it's going to depend on the kind of plant, you're going to have one sperm and one tube nucleus, and we'll discuss what a tube nucleus is for later on, or you're going to have two sperm and a tube nucleus. And so both of those pieces are going to be enclosed within the pollen grains. So then you've got the pollen grains and you have the embryo sac, and then as you're going to read about tomorrow, then you have to have pollination and fertilization takes place. But we're going to stop right there just because that's kind of a lot to absorb for one day. So make sure that it kind of look at the pictures, look at the coloring sheets I sent you, kind of go through those and make sure that you understand the process here for what's going on with each one of these, because the fact that the embryo contains 6 small cells and a large double nucleated cell, and the fact that your pollen grain contains either 1 or 2 sperm and a tube nucleus is very important when we get into the process of fertilization, and we'll hit that in the next video.